Hello everybody, I'm Rocky. If you're new here, welcome. If not, welcome back. Little known, absolutely not at all obvious fact about me is that I really love Danger Days. You know, the album we all collectively agree is MCR's best album. No one's ever argued against that, and you're not about to start arguing it now. Anyways, recently I posted some reference sheets on how to make Killjoy OCs on Tumblr and TikTok. They were filled with a combination of canon and widely accepted fanon information, and you guys seem to really like them, so I thought it'd be fun to make a more in-depth video on the topic, where it's all compiled into one spot. Now, I will be showing and referencing these sheets throughout the video, but if you want to download them in HD for your own referencing needs, they are up for free on my Ko-fi, or you can snag them off Tumblr. The information on them can also be found elsewhere from the canon, Gerard, or other fans as well. I did not create any of this information, I am simply trying to present it in a fun way. Without further ado, grab your blasters and power pop and strap in, because this is probably gonna be a long one. We should probably start with what are Killjoys, like on a base level. In the Danger Days universe, Killjoys are rebels who live out in the desert zone surrounding Battery City. They are rebelling against the control of Better Living Industries, or Blind, or BLI for short. And Better Living Industries is like the corporate dictators of Battery City, and in turn, most of America. In Battery City, no color, emotion, or creativity is allowed, therefore the Killjoys are the antithesis of that. They dress in bright colors, are loud, and their lives center around art and self-expression. In the comics, it's revealed that originally just the Fab Four were called Killjoys, and it wasn't until after their deaths that the rebel movement started collectively referring to themselves as Killjoys. The Fab Four consisted of Party Poison, Cobra Kid, Funghoul, and Jetstar, played by the band members. It was their goal to guide and protect this girl. She was prophesized to be destined to be some kind of savior for the people who would end Better Living Industries. Her name is quite literally The Girl. You'll hear some people try to claim that her name is Missile Kid or Motor Baby. Neither of these are true. Missile Kid is a whole different character slash thing unrelated to her, and Motor Baby is a Killjoy slang term, which we'll talk more about later. But yeah, she's an unnamed protagonist, and I actually think that that's really interesting in this world where your name, your identity, and your sense of self is most valuable. But anyways, girl rant aside, the Fab Four die in the Sing music video, raiding a BLI building to save the girl, making them martyrs, triggering a huge boom in the Desert Rebel movement and sense of community. Now, since Killjoy culture is all about individuality, just about anything goes when making your own, but there are a few things that every Killjoy needs. The first basic we need to cover right away is color. Killjoys are clad in the brightest colors they can find, and if you really want to nail the look, reference old comic books and pop art and even old anime for color palettes. They were likely Gerard's biggest inspo for Danger Days aesthetically. You're gonna see most Killjoys rocking with the primary colors for that reason, and it's also a common headcanon within the fandom that they may not have regular access to specific shades of colors out in the zones, especially if they're DIYing most of their clothes. So play with that as you please, but more on Killjoy fashion later. Ray guns. Unlike the plain white guns of Battery City, Killjoy guns are typically painted and decorated with words or stickers. BLI has vending machines at various locations, and guns can be obtained there via carbons, which are the currency of this society, or a Killjoy device known as a Vendahack. A Vendahack is for exactly what it sounds like, hacking vending machines. You can see Cobra and the girl use one in the Na 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 music video to obtain a gun. Ray guns have a power supply like a battery called Plus, which can also be obtained from vending machines. Since Killjoys seem to obtain these from Battery City services, this means that they paint and decorate them themselves. And using Battery City's consumerism against them is a reoccurring theme amongst Killjoys. You see this a lot with Party Poison. Obviously, their gun is Battery City manufactured, but also their helmet is the head of a Battery City propaganda mascot named Mousecat that he customized, and his jacket is Dead Pegasus merchandise, which is an oil company. The Killjoys are resourceful and will use BLI's resources and products to their benefit. Okay, masks or anything to protect your face. A Killjoy's reputation is tied to their mask, so make it your own, have your own little design on it. Some seem to have both a helmet and a traditional mask, again, such as Party Poison having his mask, and then also the Mousecat head that they modified into their own helmet. Even if the face covering that your Joy wears most often is not a traditional mask, they do all seem to have one. For firefights, if nothing else, it's an honor thing. Jackets, a Killjoy's name tag. Any kind of jacket or vest used for additional protection and maximum customization. Typically denim or leather due to durability, but like go nuts with whatever you want. Think vaguely like punk battle jackets. They should be personalized and make a statement. They don't need to be heavily modified to be iconic to your Killjoy. For example, out of the Fab 4, I think Cobra's jacket had the most customization, but Party's just had his symbol on the back. But likewise, you can go as nuts as you want, take advantage of any paint, glitter, beads, fabric, pins, or whatever else your Joy can get their hands on. Just as a little bonus, but the Killjoy slogan is Art is the Weapon, and in some promotional material this has been linked into Art is the Weapon against life as a symptom. Frank has also posted a modified version of this quote that went, Art is the weapon, your imagination is the ammunition, stay dirty, stay dangerous, create and destroy as you see fit. As for symbols, there is of course the spider. The Fab 4 also each had symbols, and given that they're like folk heroes, I imagine those symbols are still used within the movement. And I also would say it's safe to assume that other Killjoys may make their own symbols as well, especially the most active or infamous ones. So perhaps keep that in mind, especially if you want patch or graffiti ideas. The sky's really the limit when it comes to Killjoy fashion, and the more strange and obscene the better. Bright colors, mixed match patterns, animal prints, body glitter, layered accessories, literally whatever under the sun. And we already talked a bit about color, jacket, and masks, but I have a few other pointers as well. I'll put a list on screen of some real-world inspo that you could look into if you need ideas. I won't go into each one in depth here, but things like punk, new wave, and David Bowie are good places to start. And again, comic books. Also consider things such as hot pants, big boots, light scarves, and big flashy jewelry. Red, white, and blue seemed popular among the Fab 4, which makes sense because do remember that the Killjoys are American rebels, so combining the American flag with their own logos and slogans is a common statement. There's also a lot of influence from Japan and specifically anime in Danger Days as well, so that's another direction you could take. I do find Asian alternative fashion to often be good Killjoy inspo too. Coverage is pretty damn important. The sun is radioactive and being in it for too long will fry your Killjoy. Cover up and protect your skin. This isn't necessarily mandatory even in canon, but consider why your Killjoy doesn't bother if you decide not to. This doesn't necessarily need to be a profound reason. I have a Killjoy who runs around barefoot or in one shoe just because she's a maniac and never replaced her shoes. With all this focus on outfits, don't forget about hair. Hair can be one of the easiest things to customize uniquely, so take full advantage of that. Again, punks may be a good place to start for inspo. The thing here is to just challenge yourself outside of your comfort zone, get creative, and make something weird. Okay, when it comes to different types of Killjoys, there's a bunch. Some canon, some widely accepted fanon. I probably won't mention them all, and your Killjoy doesn't need to be part of a specific type if you do not want them to be. But I'm gonna touch on this because it's further world building. Before I do, I'm gonna give a quick disclaimer about the comics. There are two different True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoy series, Killjoy California and Killjoy's National Anthem. California is a time skip from the Danger Days album story and is a continuation of the same story. The Fab 4 are dead and therefore absent, but it expands upon other characters, introduces some others, and fleshes out the world more. Killjoy's National Anthem is a different continuity and is not connected to the Danger Days story at all. It is Gerard's original draft of the Killjoys characters and story that he decided years later he still liked and was going to go finish anyways. For that reason, I will not be mentioning National Anthem here much, if at all, because how much of it is relevant to the Danger Days universe is highly debatable, but definitely a very small amount. I also haven't refreshed myself on it in a while, so I wouldn't be able to accurately source it anyways. So yes, if I reference the comics, I am talking about California. On a similar note, much of conventional weapons is part of the first draft for Danger Days, so many people work its songs into the Danger Days plotline, and some people consider it a Killjoy's National Anthem soundtrack. Do with that as you please. I don't really have an answer for you as to what to canonically do with it because I don't know. I'm not Gerard. I hate to be the one to deliver that news, but it's worth mentioning regardless. Okay, end disclaimer. On to the Killjoy Pokedex. Crash Queens are like adrenaline junkies, thrill seekers, daredevils, whatever you want to call them. They have an unhealthy hunger for throwing themselves into dangerous or even deadly situations for fun. They're sometimes referred to as cannonballs. Fun Ghoul is typically considered a Crash Queen, and Val Velocity is directly referred to as one within the comics. This could include things such as intentionally wandering into Zone 6 for fun, which we will talk about later. Motor babies are Killjoys who live out of their vehicles, and they may or may not be nomadic. Oftentimes they're gearheads. This could be like, I don't know, a Killjoy who lives out of cars in an abandoned junkyard, or maybe it relates to their job out in the zone, such as food truck owners. This lifestyle also makes sense because working vehicles are likely a rarity out in the zones. The Fab Four, and by association the girl, do not count in this description because while they had the Trans AM, they did not live out of it. They lived in a diner. Bulletproof Faces are rebels who have become too famous or like folk heroes for BLI to silence their influence even after the Killjoy has been dusted. This would include the Fab Four and Dr. Death Defying, and in most cases is going to be Killjoys at the forefront of the movement or Joys providing the most to their community. Ritalin rats are simply drug addicts. This could include the BLI mandated medication or general zone drugs. Waveheads are addicted specifically to the radioactive waves of the sun and will intentionally lay out in them until they fry. They can be seen within the comics, and it's implied that Cherry Cola is a recovered wavehead. Tumbleweeds are Joys who wander the desert with no home. Many of them simply refuse to be stationary or belong to any community. A puppy or bunny is the youngest or newest member of a Killjoy gang. They typically have a kid-sibling-like relationship with their gang, but that's not mandatory. However, the gang does look out for them and shows them the ropes. Sand pups are Killjoys who were born in the zones or have been there since very early childhood. Bat rat is a derogatory term sand pups use for new Killjoys fresh out of the city, may be referred to as bats out of hell in a more endearing sense, all with a similar definition to undergrad, which means an escaped citizen who is on their way to becoming a Killjoy but has not yet experienced firefights or anything cruel of the desert. Rose dusters refer to elder Killjoys who have stopped fighting and accepted death, however it may come. In many ways, this includes Dr. Death Defying. There's actually a lot to go over when it comes to culture and customs and other such information, so let's do our best to break this down, and I will be lightning rounding some of them. You can find most of this information and more in the fan-made Danger Days dictionary that I've linked below. We've already covered a few things such as mask and fashion. This is probably as good of a place as any to mention this, as I feel it would be a crime not to. But Mad Gear and the Missile Kid is a fictional band within the universe. MCR released an EP of 3 songs by them, and said that this is what they imagined the Fab Four were listening to. If you dig around on Dr. Death Defying's Twitter page, you can likely find names of other bands and locations where zone bands may often perform, such as the Fuck You House. Dead Satellites briefly touches on this as well. Now, Mad Gear is actually the only member of the band. Missile Kid is said to not actually be a person, but simply an invention of Mad Gear's after a caffeine-induced vision he had about performing on stage with a sentient dancing weapon that supposedly made his music better. Now, it's also implied that Missile Kid may not exist at all outside of Mad Gear's imagination, and Bro's just tweaking out on stage. This may be a metaphor to drug trips and relying heavily on drugs to feel capable of performing adequately. I don't know for sure, so don't hold me to that, but that's how I interpreted it. Bad luck beads are prayer beads of sorts that the Killjoys wear, including Party Poison and Cobra Kid. They're made of wood and are used to mark time and be good luck charms, each one offering a different blessing, and collecting them is common practice in the zones. In real-life merch, and I think all canon mentions, they are bracelets, but it's also generally accepted that they can also be necklaces, earrings, belts, hung on rear-view mirrors, whatever. Typically, a Killjoy's first beads are given to them by their first gang or group. Destroya is a massive android whose head lays abandoned in Zone 2. He's prophesied to someday be activated by the androids of Battery City who worship him and destroy the city, liberating the androids. The Nest is a small house built near Destroya that sometimes loses power but otherwise is usually well stocked with video games, radios, and junk food. The Phoenix Witch is a death deity for the Killjoys. She guides souls to the afterlife and cares for them there, and has a mailbox in Zone 4 dedicated to her. When a Killjoy is ghosted, their most important belongings, such as their mask and jacket, are brought to the mailbox by friends, family, and lovers. The Phoenix Witch will collect these items in her shopping cart and then send the Killjoy spirit safely into the afterlife. The girl spends most of the comic wanting to get Party Poison's mask to the mailbox and eventually succeeds when Val Velocity gives it back. So it's entirely possible that Party's spirit didn't pass over until the end. The mailbox is also used as a form of communication between the living and the dead via letters, art, and gifts that the witch delivers. In the music videos, you can see the girl leave a letter to her mother in it. I've also seen fans, and I'll put one of the posts on screen if I can find it because they're really sweet posts, but I've seen fans come up with like Killjoy Day of the Dead traditions, and it's really cool. A firefight is any fight that involves ray guns. Power Pup is an overproduced canned dog food made in Battery City that mostly ends up in the zones, and Killjoys use it as food. A lighthouse are well-known places in the zones that are like safe houses. These may be abandoned motels, diners, warehouses, whatever. Sunskin is the art of covering your body almost entirely in glitter, typically for speed events like derbies or drag races. Dead Pegasus is the dominant gas station company in the zones, which always has a steady supply of gas. Probably a reference to the American gas company that has a Pegasus logo. Electrocat is a popular battery brand in both the zones and the city. Almost everything runs on batteries. Trading is a common practice in the zones. Stories, songs, bracelets, books, food, clothes, tools, makeup, literally anything and everything. I wasn't really sure where to throw this in, and that's that Killjoys tend to have intense tan lines and sunburns, especially around their eyes from their masks. Remember, they live in a radioactive desert, so it's uncommon to be super pale unless you're fresh out of the city. A Killjoy's name has personal meaning. You can totally pick a name for your joy just because it sounds cool, but try to come up with ways to give it meaning to them. What does your Killjoy pride themselves on? What do they value? What do they associate themselves with? What's something about themselves they emphasize? Etc., etc. I actually prefer coming up with a name and then basing the design around it. There are, however, some reoccurring themes in names. The big one is going to be onomatopoeias, so you know, your noise words. Common themes also include the desert, drinks, items, noise, drugs, kink references, electricity and technology, and the end of the world. Play around with alliteration, synonyms, connotations, and the general Danger Days aesthetic to find something that rolls off the tongue. Your name also doesn't really need to make sense. Smash random cool words together. We love to see it. I'm gonna lightning round the zones like economies and like ecosystems, that's the word, because I don't actually have the zone map in front of me right now, or like my notes. I don't know where it went, and I forgot to write it down in the script, but Zone 1 is going to be the most dangerous because it's closest to the city. I can't think of anything particularly noteworthy in Zone 1. Zone 2 is where Dr. Death Defying's Radio Shack is because it's still close enough to the city that there's strong signal, and it also can be used as a safe place for Killjoys escaping Battery City. Zone 2 is also where Destroya and the Nest are. Zone 3 is filled with a bunch of vegetation. That's where the Witch's Garden is. Zone 2 and 3 are going to be where the most firefights are. Zone 4 is your marketplace, and also where the witch's mailbox is. And then Zone 5 is the loudest, the most active, the most lively because it's the furthest from the city. And that's where your nightclubs like Hyperthrust are gonna be. That's where all of your like partying and big events are gonna be held. And then Zone 6 is uninhabitable because of the pig bombings of, I believe it was 2017. But yes, Better Living Industries bombed what used to be Zone 7, which was like a farming community for the Killjoys, and it wiped out Zone 7 completely and made Zone 6 absolutely uninhabitable. Some Killjoys like to run in there for fun to see how long they can stay in there without fucking dying. And then Zone 7, like I said, is completely wiped out and is also sometimes used in Killjoy slang to be a term to mean like just dead. Like if a Killjoy has gone to Zone 7, they are dead. Okay, I think that should be plenty of information to get you well on your way, but before I go, or before you go, I live here, I do have a few other things that I want to say. First of all, remember that there's no real rules, and if there are, I sure as hell am not the person who makes them. Secondly, I have Killjoy reference sheet commissions open. They are in my art style, obviously, but are in the layout of the Killjoy comic sheets. Thirdly, I'm offering a 15% discount on all other commissions that are MCR themed, so if you commission me to draw the members or a canon character like Helena or the Parader, you can use the code Surprise Party at checkout on Ko-fi for the discount. As always, my art server, commissions, socials, and all other links and information are in the description. Thank you so much to my Ko-fi member, Witchy Box of Beans, for your continued support. It means the world to me. Thank you all so much for watching this far if you did, and I hope to see you again next time.